We're going to do two proofs for those. Please open the flappy to side, side, side. We may have to squeeze our number 4 in, depending on how you folded yours. So no worries. We can make it work. Alright, so remember, with every proof we do, what do we start with?
You're given.
You're given every single time. So what do they give us to begin with? They give us two things, right? Alright, so that's what we're going to write in our first space. RP is congruent to PS. And our reason is? Given. And we're going to put one ticky on RP, and we're going to put one ticky on PS. And what do the tickies mean?
They're congruent.
They're congruent.
Yeah.
What is the second thing that they give us?
RQ is good to QS.
So we're going to write that in the second spot. RQ is congruent to QS. And what reason is that? Given. And we're going to put two tickies on those. Now, do these two triangles share a side?
Yeah.
And over the past 2 days, we've been working on those colored sheets where we talk about when they share a side, they are what? The side is congruent to itself. So we're going to say PQ is congruent to what? We went from 1 ticky to 2, so what would we do again? 1 ticky to 2. So PQ is congruent to P2. And what property is that? Reflexive. Take a point.
My name is invisible, bro. I keep on saying reflective.
Now, our goal is to prove that triangle RPQ is congruent to triangle SPQ. And that is always our last statement. Our proof is always our last statement. Now, we can put 3 tickies here if we want to. Can we prove that those two triangles are congruent?
Yes.
By what theorem? And boom, we're done. So you would write that triangle RPQ is congruent to triangle SPQ by side, side, side. Was that proof that crazy?
No. It was easy.
It was, wasn't it? And that's basically what we did yesterday and the day before, right? When we were building to our proofs. Any questions so far? Are you sure? All right, let's go to number 2. All right, number 2 says that B is the midpoint of AC and AD is congruent to CD. Now, before we go any further, tell me what it means for something to be a midpoint. What does that mean? What does that mean? Cuts it in half.
Yeah.
You're getting there. That's what I wanted. You can take a point, and whoever said cuts it in half, take a point. All right, so the first thing, what do we list every time? The given. And what did they give us? The first thing that they gave us. Start with the first thing they gave us. All right, let's write that down. B is the midpoint of AC. B is the midpoint of AC. And what reason is that? Given. Now, AC is right here, and it says B is the midpoint. So what do we know about these two segments? So how would we list that? AB is congruent to what, honey?
CB.
CB. Good. Take a point. Now remember, you go from the outside of the triangle to the inside, so you have to go from the outside of the triangle to the inside. Is that given? Look at you go. Take a point. Definition of midpoint. Because it says that it's the midpoint. Now, do they give us anything else up here? All right, let's write that. AD is congruent to CD. And what reason is that? Given. Now, do we need to put tickies on those?
Yes.
All right, so I put one ticky on AB and CB. I'm going to put two tickies on AD and CD. Why? Why?
They share.
Because they share a side. And if they share a side, what do we know? They're congruent. So how do y'all want to write this? No, we need to list it out, baby. We can't just write they congruent. Do what? DB is congruent to DB. Take a point, both of you. And what property is that? Reflexive. Just use the reflexive property every time.
If we used reflexive last time,
Oh, what is symmetric then?
That if you cut it in half and fold it up, the same pieces will touch. So it fits flipped. So if this said DB and BD, that would be symmetric. Alright, and what's the last thing we need to write? Are we done?
No, we gotta write the congruent statement.
We got to write the congruent statement. So triangle what?
ABD.
Alright, so they went out, in, up is congruent to out, in, up. Very good. And what property is that? And the reason it's side, 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 in case you don't know, is because we have a side. We have a side, and we have a side.
Yes, ma'am. I got a ton of 305 up in here.
So if it was side, angle side, what would we have to have in the middle? An angle. So you would have to have that. Are we ready for side, angle, side? Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Let's do side, angle, side. I'm going to leave number 4 for you for your homework. So we're going to do 3 together. 4 is going to be homework. What, darling? Yes? Well, we could do it right now if you wanted me to come around and check right now instead of doing it tonight. Okay.
Cameron, you don't forget it.
All right, let's look at this problem. Give me the first thing. Tell me what it says. All right, what does that mean? It cuts it in half. If it bisects the angle, it cuts it in half. So let's start by writing down our first given. Now remember they give us 2. I want to write down the first one. The first given is XZ angle WXY. And what reason is that again? Given. Now WXY is this top angle up here. That's the top of our triangles. And if it bisects it, that means it cuts it in half. So what's going to be true about this left angle? It's congruent to the right side. So put 1 rainbow. So can we write that statement that those 2 angles are congruent? How would we label the first angle? Now let's cover up, just in case we don't know what I mean. Let's cover up this side. Name that first angle. Name that rainbow for me. WXZ. WXZ. Good. Take a point. So we're going to say that angle WXZ is congruent to angle. Name the other side. YXZ. Now, why would we not do ZXY? Awesome. So you have to, if we start from the outside over here, we have to start from the outside over here. So it's congruent to YXZ. And what reason is that?
Oh, congruent angles.
It's not segments. And before we said definition of a midpoint, but what is this? It bisects a what? So what's that called? An angle bisector. Take a point. So this is the definition of angle bisector. On your test, you're going to be able to, you're going to have a word bank to choose from.
Thank the Lord.
Or thank Asbury.
Thank the Lord for giving me this.
All right, now what's the next thing that we need to list? We listed our first given. We did that. We need the second given. And what is our second given? Alright, segment WX, mumble, 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 is congruent to XY. And what reason is that? Given. Alright, so we have a rainbow. Let's put a ticky on WX and XY. Now, we're trying to prove that these two triangles are congruent. And we have a side, and we have an angle. So we either need to have another side or another angle. Do they share a side?
Yes.
What side do they share?
X.
So we're going to say that XZ is congruent to what? XZ. And what property is that? The reflexive property. Take a point. Well, I'm hoping it'll help some of our grades.
My grade straight. I have an 80.
You could do better. Alright, so now we have two tickies here. How would we prove that these two triangles are congruent? We have a side, we have an angle, we have a side. We have a side, we have an angle, we have a side. So what would we use? Oh my potatoes.
Something on the side, ain't side. Wow.
I was hoping that someone would notice, but we didn't. So WZX is congruent to triangle what? YZX. By what property? I don't know. Alright, practice number 4 right now. Go.
Yeah,
Let's get this money.
I'm in constant confusion with y'all. If we get our flappies done, we won't have homework. How about that?
All of them done?
At least to angle, side angle.
time is this? Time.
We got time. We can do this.
What time's the bell even ring for this class?
Never.
Today I got time, cuz.
58.
Humans.
I ain't got time. What is that? But today I got time.
Can y'all stop talking and do this math? Gracias.
I'm gonna do this math in Salisbury. Because today I got time.
What is it?
I'm kind of guessing. I think this is correct.
Don't guess. Talk to your group.
Do you think number 2 is definition of midpoint?
I would guess.
Like, I was about to put my guys like,
Yes.
it is.
It is the definition of something.
What you write down for everything?
That was congruent to PM. Definition of midpoint.
Definition of
You did it on
midpoint.
OP too?
Lines.
Definition.
It tells you that it's the midpoint.
No, I'm talking about LN and OP, not LNN and what?
Baby, it tells you that it's the midpoint. You can't say that LN and OP are congruent. It doesn't give us anything about those.
What?
Huh?
Guys, you cannot say that LN and OP are congruent. It does not say anything about LN and OP in this given.
I was like,
Stop that.
But LP and NO, that's already given.
Oh, baby cakes. It tells us that M is the midpoint of LP and NO. Okay?
Yeah.
So start with your given.
Just the first thing we write down is the LP.
Always write down your given. If it's the midpoint, what does that mean? It cuts it in half. So what would you do with these sides?
oh, I don't know. But like, I don't know.
Guys, if M is the midpoint of this segment, what would be true about these two sides? So put a ticky.
Ticky.
And if M is the midpoint of NO, what would be true about these two? Put a ticky. 2 tickies. Yes. And then you need to be able to figure out the angle.
Would 4 happen to be LP is congruent to LP,
No.
I don't know.
then I have no idea.
You have to use an angle because it's side, angle, side. We're on the side, angle, side flappy.
Angle M is
LN is
You have to label it.
O is congruent to PMN.
Angle M is congruent to
Why are you using the outside angles and not the inside angles of the triangle?
Angle N, no, angle LMN is
Oh,
congruent
LMN.
to angle PMO. Does that seem accurate?
Put
Okay.
angle M in.
Yeah.
You can't say that. You have to label it because there's two. You have to use 3 points or it won't count. Life is tough. It's hard out there for a pimp.
Hey, you know what pimp is that?
I'm just saying in general. I hear it's hard out there.
Listen, did you just say what makes sense?
No. That was, we did this up here too.
Did y'all get step 2 right?
Yes, I did. Are you proud of me?
I am.
Not really.
Not for real.
Hey, you can
I don't apologize.
George, you're not respecting these people. Can't be showing
Respect
you gotta
women.
respect these people.
Definition of angle bisector.
I got mad respect for females.
Definition of angle bisector.
It doesn't bisect anything, baby. We don't bisect any angles. We don't have any angle bisectors in this.
Reflective.
Oh, my stars. Alright, so the next thing I would say is that NM is congruent to OM by the definition of a midpoint.
Okay, that's how far I got.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why we would not see this other connection, but what kind of angles do these make? And what do we know about vertical angles? So we would put a rainbow here and a rainbow here. So how would we list this angle on the left?
LM.
LMN. So we went 1, middle, 2. So what would we do on the other side?
PMO.
Angle PMO. And what definition is that?
Vertical angles.
Oh, I get it now.
Yeah, you're done.
Now, we have a side, we have an angle, we have a side, we have a side, we have an angle, we have a side. How would we say that these two triangles are congruent? Now, guys, I need you to please make sure you are drawing your triangle symbol and your angle symbol because I've noticed on some of your homework that you're not, and I will count off because I don't know if you mean the angle or the triangle. They're two different things. Does everybody understand? Why is your notebook look? Oh, you haven't glued your thing down.
It wouldn't fit my soul.
I folded it.
Yes, it's going to have to hold.
I don't like that.
All right, are you ready?
Hey, my chart.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, next flappy, angle, side, angle. So how many angles are we going to have in this one? And how many sides? Okay. Now, we're going to walk through this one together. It starts by telling us what? No, that line does not mean congruent. That means parallel, yes. So let's put one arrow on PQ and one arrow on RS. Those two are parallel, which means that this line in the middle is a transversal. What?
Wait, how do we know we were Never mind. Never mind.
It gave us to us?
Yeah, I
Okay. Alright, then it tells us that QR is parallel to PS. So we're going to put 2 arrows on this one. And we're going to put 2 arrows on this one. It's just like tickies. When you have one congruent to the other, you use 1 ticky. And then for your next one, you use 2 tickies. Okay. I do too. So we're not going to judge.
Yeah, but you're lovable.
No. Alright, let's start with our first given. What do they tell us first? Alright, let's write that down. PQ is parallel to RS, and the reason is given.
It's hilarious.
And what's our next given?
QR is parallel to PS. Yeah, we finish this stuff.
And the answer is?
Given.
Okay. Now, I'm going to blow your mind,
Good enough.
but I want you to calm down. Don't turn your paper, just watch mine. Okay? These two lines are parallel, correct?
Not angle, side angle.
Don't do this, just watch. That means that this right here is a transversal. And we know stuff about transversals. What do we know about this angle right here and this angle right here?
Congruent.
Why?
Because they're alternate interiors.
Take a point.
Trying you, bro.
So those two angles are congruent because it's alternate interior angles. So we would say angle PQS. PQS. Angle PQS is congruent.
The PDS. Or
PQS. So I went down at the bottom, up S.
RSQ.
RSQ. Good. Take a point.
I'll take it.
And that's alternate interior angles. Now, we have another pair of alternate interior angles. It's this one over here. And which one? This one down here?
Yeah.
So I need to put 2 on that. So name this top angle for me.
So what happened?
Hang on just a second. What would it be?
QSP.
QRS.
The top one.
Oh,
RQS. The top one. This one right here. RQS.
Would it matter? What's over here?
If you said SQR,
Yeah.
no, that's fine.
I'm talking about like, you know how we did PQS is like the angle 1?
Uh-huh.
And then would it matter if we put RQS as angle 1?
No.
Alright.
Alright, so RQS is congruent to what? PSQ. Take a point. By what reasoning? Okay, we have 2 angles. We have 2 angles, and now we need a side. Are there any sides that are congruent?
Yes.
Which one?
RSQ.
No.
QS.
QS is congruent to?
Oh.
QS.
I read that wrong.
SQ.
QS is congruent to SQ. Yep.
Yeah.
Because we went 1, 2, so we'd have to go 1, 2. So QS is congruent to SQ, and what property is that? Symmetric! Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an outline of the triangles that it's telling us. So it says triangle QPS. That's this one, correct?
Yes.
QPS is this blue triangle. I need darker markers. And then the other one is SRQ. So we have an angle, we have a side, we have an angle. Then we have an angle, we have a side, we have an angle. So how are these 2 triangles congruent? By angle, side, angle. So triangle QPS is congruent to triangle SRQ by angle, side, angle. Now you are going to use similar things on the next one. Try number 6. You're going to use corresponding angles on the next one. Just to go ahead and let you know now. You're going to use corresponding angles. Is everybody done with number 5?
Yeah.
Okay? Look at number 6. Use corresponding angles. Don't freak out just because there's 7 things. You've got 3 given. Remember that. Don't be a baby.
No free will.
I didn't have a childhood, so like I kind of miss it. I didn't. I grew up fast. I was when I was a kid. There was like a laundry basket, and I was too short to do laundry, so I would fill my laundry basket up with clothes, step inside my laundry basket, get the clothes into the washing machine.
I'm so sorry.
Like that was me as a kid because I was too short to do it at like 5.
I didn't have a childhood because I grew up and no one liked me.
I'll do that.
Yeah, I got I like a 10-year-old.
This
I was
chick
like,
Skylar would
I
like
was
trip
three.
me every day in class.
This lady named Miss Asbury wanted us to do our work.
I know my work. I'm just multitasking.
I've heard about her.
She can be.
I hope she didn't hear this.
She did.
Oh my god.
Just wait. I'll get you when you're least expecting it.
Guys, I'm gonna come in here tomorrow and give me a knife in my lung.
What are we doing tomorrow?
Why did
We're gonna be watching The Tempest.
Good.
So when are you taking your math workshop test?
Guessing tomorrow during the day.
Is there a math workshop?
If I can.
She just
Yes.
said that, bro.
I'm gonna try real hard.
Said that
But
you back.
Are you going on the parade trip?
yeah.
You going to Philly?
Yeah.
No.
Philly's Sunday.
I'll miss you.
This is like the 5th time
I
I've
miss
talked
you
about
too.
Like the answers to this sheet.
They also
Philly cheesesteak is good.
Philly cheesesteak?
I filled out where you need to put your given, so I would make sure you put those there.
Well, are you kidding me?
I got it right.
So would be second.
You can switch it around, it's okay. But I need you to think about what it says about the midpoint. So if it's the midpoint, what does that mean?
So, like,
If C is the midpoint of AD, what does that mean?
AC is congruent to DC.
Take a point.
Students, I have an important message. Please remain in your class till I'm finished. Please remain in class till I'm finished. Have a message from Dr. Hester regarding the survey